So, in recent weeks, there's been a surprising amount of news about CDPR's upcoming Witcher games, including some confirmed characters and a possible release date. And most of that news has been about the first of the new Witcher trilogy that's being worked on. The game most people are calling The Witcher 4, even if it probably won't be called that. CDPR have said as much, but as far as the name goes, all we know is that the project's code name is Polaris, so for now, calling the first game in this new Witcher trilogy The Witcher 4 is fine, I guess. Point is, most of the news has been about that one as opposed to the other stuff that's being worked on, like the Witcher 1 remake, or that mysterious Witcher spin-off that's being developed in Boston, which we don't really know anything about, other than it apparently will be multiplayer in some capacity, which, I don't know about that one, I guess we'll see, but let's just get to all the news there is to cover about Polaris. First and foremost, we now know of 2 confirmed characters that'll be in the game. We'll start with the less exciting one because it kinda leads into the second confirmed character, who is someone that you really should be familiar with if you're watching this video. So, just a couple of days ago, an actor by the name of Jake Lampert, not Lambert, Lampert, let slip, and I say let slip because this has now all been hastily taken down, wiped clean from where he posted it, which is always a sign it wasn't supposed to be said, but he announced on his resume that he had been cast in the upcoming Witcher game Polaris as a character named Branko. And equally interesting, he mentioned that his lines had already been directed by Kate Saxon, who has been around in that same voice acting direction role since The Witcher 2. We don't know anything about this character Branko, just based on the name though, I'd assume he's from the Northern Realms, but we do know that this specific actor, and you have to assume many others, are already and have been recording their lines for Polaris, which makes a lot of sense considering that as of CDPR's most recent development update, over 400 of CDPR's 600-ish developers had been moved to the Polaris team, and that number has only grown since then. Now, to keep moving, the other confirmed character for Polaris isn't a complete unknown like Branko. You might have actually heard of this one. The other character's name is Geralt, and for those who don't know, Geralt is a character who appeared in the first 3 games, very small role, blink and you might miss him, but the voice actor for Geralt, Doug Cockle, recently confirmed in an interview that Geralt will indeed be back in Polaris, and I have some thoughts on this, but first, let's hear what Doug had to say.
Witcher 4 has been announced. I can't say anything about it. What we know is that Geralt will be part of the game. We just don't know how much, and the game won't focus on Geralt, so it's not about him this time. We don't know who it's about. I'm excited to find out. I want to know. I have not seen any script yet. I have not, I couldn't tell you if I did. This is the thing, so, I could be lying through my teeth. But I'm not, or am I?
So, Geralt is definitely back. Or is he? And I only say or is he because there's a small part of me that wonders if Doug saw the same quote from CDPR that I've seen many times over the years. It gets recycled into a new article like every few months, but maybe he saw that and took that quote as recent confirmation that Geralt is coming back. If you don't know what quote I'm talking about, John Mamaeus, who is a guy who worked on Cyberpunk and was an executive producer on Witcher 3, he's no longer at CDPR, I don't think, but he said at one point while he was at the studio that Geralt could absolutely return in a future Witcher game, just in a smaller role. And ever since he said that, you'll see a new article about that one quote pop up every few months, and the articles are often written like it's new information, so part of me wonders if Doug saw one of those articles and took it as a sure thing. I mean, the way Doug says, "We know Geralt is returning," kind of sounds like he thinks it's common knowledge, something that has been officially announced as opposed to one person at CDPR saying that it could possibly happen in the future, but that's just the skeptical part of me talking. So if Doug does know for sure behind the scenes that Geralt is back, well, to me, as much as I love Geralt, I would argue what's most interesting about that is if true, that means the new trilogy is going to take place during Geralt's lifetime, which means CDPR are not going with the option of, let's go back in time a few hundred years and see the golden age of Witchers, when the fortresses were at their peak, monsters were everywhere, and Witchers weren't the last of a dying breed. Personally, as popular as that idea has always been, going back in time to the peak of Witchers, and I still think CDPR are going to do it, too many people want it, but I've always wondered how that would go, because I don't think your average Witcher fan realizes just how heavily the existing games lean on the books. I mean, most people have no way of knowing this, but The Witcher 3's main quest is in many ways just a retelling of the books, and that's not even to mention that 85% of people's favorite characters are book characters. CDPR adapted those characters incredibly well, there's no taking away from that. I mean, The Witcher 3 is my favorite game ever, but The games are built from a very strong foundation of characters and an incredible protagonist, but if you go back 300-400 years, CDPR would pretty much be starting from scratch with this franchise, because if you've read the books, you know that The Witcher isn't the Lord of the Rings in terms of world building, and that's putting it very mildly. I can't stress this enough, we know next to nothing about the world of The Witcher pre-Geralt. There's not much world building in the books because they're all about the characters, and not at all about establishing the history of the continent, except for what's directly relevant to our main cast. To quote Sapkowski himself, "There is no actual world in my books. My world is a pseudo-world, it's just a background, a fairground canvas moved by a spinning wheel." That spinning wheel being, of course, Geralt, and Ciri, and Yennefer, and the games are built on that foundation of being character first. There's just not a world for CDPR to go back to, at least not an existing one. They'd have to come up with one, and come up with just about everything from ground zero, other than small seeds that were planted in The Witcher 3, and maybe half a dozen sentences total from the books. I'm not saying CDPR shouldn't try it, it's a really interesting idea, and one I think they'll run with sooner or later because it gives them a lot of freedom and people want to see Witchers during their golden age. But if Geralt really is back, but not as the main character like Doug says, it makes me wonder, which direction are we going in the timeline? I mean, you could just go back 3, maybe 4 decades, which would already put us in pretty unknown territory. Even for Geralt, we currently know almost nothing about his life 40 years before the games, although there is a new Witcher book coming out about Geralt in his 20s, which should answer a lot of questions. But anyway, the more interesting option for The Witcher 4, not saying better necessarily, but interesting for sure, is if we're moving forward in the timeline, past The Witcher 3. That would make the who is going to be our main character situation even more fascinating, and we actually have a recent comment from CDPR that maybe gives it away, although personally, I kinda hope it doesn't based on, well, what they said. Before we get to that comment though, I do need to take a second to thank my favorite by far sponsor for the channel, Factor, who in my opinion are the meal delivery service, the one you should really consider. I've said this many times because it's true, but since October 2023, over a year ago, I've been ordering from Factor out of my own pocket because their meals have solved every food problem I've ever had. If you're like me and you work a lot, maybe too much, you might understand the struggle of just not having time to cook, or having a spare second really. And the unfortunate thing is that most convenient foods are either unhealthy, prohibitively expensive, or just plain boring. But Factor is the rare exception that's none of those things. Their meals are fresh, they're very affordable, and they're beyond easy to prepare. Their meals can be heated and ready to eat in just 2 minutes, and your order is fully customizable, from how many meals to what meals you get, with a rotating menu of over 30 options to choose from each and every week. To get started, head to Factor75.com or click the link below and use code 50NEON to get 50% off your first Factor box and free shipping. If you're on the fence, just know that you won't be locked in for anything if you give them a try. You can cancel or skip whatever weeks you want at literally any time with no charge, so I'm just personally recommending give that heavily discounted first box a go, and I promise you won't be disappointed. So, to get to that dev comment about who the main character, or maybe characters, of this new trilogy might be, recently Sebastian Kalemba, who is the game director on Polaris, he was formerly the animation director for Blood and Wine, so point is, he's been around. He was also responsible for the amazing Killing Monsters trailer, but he gave an interview specifically about the development of Polaris. Some of what he said was the vague bigger and better talk you often hear about sequels. He mentioned pushing the limits of what's possible, and I think the words more intense were used several times, but by design there's not much information you can pull from that kind of talk. When discussing the story of Polaris though, this is what Sebastian had to say. We have some elements of the lore that need to be kept, as the universe is always the same and we can't go beyond certain limits. We must follow a very specific direction while innovating. The player, though, must be able to have freedom, feel like they are free. Starting from the construction of the character, our pressure point is immersion. It's about the possibility of choosing your own path. Also the build, obviously, because being an RPG, the player must be able to build their character as he sees fit. The Witcher will follow this structure. Lots of freedom, but there is a specific path to follow from a narrative point of view. The key sentence there is, of course, starting from the construction of the character. You could argue he just means what armor you choose or how you invest your skill points, but just a sentence later he says, also the build, obviously, specifically singling out your build as a separate thing that hadn't yet been referenced. It sounds like, from what he's saying here, that Polaris is going to give the people, or at least the majority, what they want. a custom character, a build-your-own Witcher situation, although I would hope it's at least cyberpunk-ish, where instead of a complete nothing character, you're someone with some personality like V, as opposed to the wet paper bag that most create-your-own character games offer. And I would know because I'm currently trying to power through Dragon Age the Veilguard to review it, and, well, the less it's said about Rook in that game, the better. Anyway, I will admit, for me, I have always wanted Polaris to have a set character. I just think dialogue and stories in gaming are way better when you have one, but to be fair, CDPR did do the make-your-own character thing better than 99% of other attempts with Cyberpunk, so I'm not going to complain, and to be honest, living up to Geralt feels like an almost impossible task for a new main character to achieve, so maybe the create-your-own Witcher is the right way to go, at least for this new trilogy. I do wonder if this game is really set during Geralt's life, potentially post-Witcher 3, if we'll see more of Ciri's story. I really think if Ciri was more universally loved, I mean, I love Ciri a lot, but I know most people don't want her as a protagonist for a variety of reasons, but I think if she were more of a unanimous fan favorite, she would be the main character. However, she's not. That's just the reality of it. I love Ciri, but at the same time, I completely recognize that making her the main character for the new trilogy would go over poorly. Not for everyone, but for enough people where I just don't think CDPR are going to do it. But at the same time, I don't think anyone would mind if Ciri were in Polaris as a side character, and I actually really like the idea, maybe even love the idea, of the main character of Polaris being a mysterious new Witcher, probably from the previously unknown School of the Lynx, we've seen the medallion, and then your Witcher getting wrapped up in some adventure with certain characters we already know. I think that could be pretty fresh and interesting without needing to trample on The Witcher 3 at all. Anyway, the final bit of news we have to cover today is in regard to a potential release date for Polaris, and the only reason I'm even bringing this one up is because one of the sources is CDPR themselves, more specifically their game launcher GOG. So, last week, a release year for The Witcher Polaris popped up in two separate places. The first was the resume of the very same Jake Lampert we mentioned before. In his resume update about being cast in Polaris, he listed the release date as 2025. If you're thinking, oh, that's just an actor in a game listing a release date, not really a big deal or worth mentioning, I completely agree. But around the very same time, the official landing page on GOG for the new Witcher game, again, GOG is CDPR's platform, also updated to say that Polaris would be releasing in 2025. That one did say a date, December 31st, but that's always the placeholder date when the specific day of release isn't known, but the year is. I think 2025 seems incredibly soon, considering we haven't even seen like a teaser trailer or anything, although it is worth mentioning that in 2022, 3 years ago, CDPR said that Polaris was at least 3 years away, which lines up with 2025. I kinda hope they take at least a full extra year in 2026 to let it cook, but we'll find out soon enough. At the very least, I think we'll be getting a trailer next year. We need to see what this game even is. Tons of people have been working on it for quite a long time at this point. Anyway, if you enjoyed this video and want to see more Witcher 4 coverage, I'd definitely appreciate if you could leave this video a like, it really helps my content get out there. And similarly, if you want Witcher and Kingdom Come Deliverance and other similar content in your sub box, this is a pretty good place to subscribe, I'd say. Thank you all so much for watching, thank you to my patrons for their continued support, and for now, that's all. See ya.